From a network of highly secure, top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider Podcast, the podcast that always has the same strategic partners. I am your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by Express News Sports editor Nick Talbot, beat writers Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald. Since we met you last, the Spurs ended a losing streak, might have started in a new one, added a new minority owner. Where would the beat writers like to start with this team this week? Jeff, go ahead.
I would like to start with Tom Orsborn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom, what do you?
Well, I'm wondering with your lead in, I'm wondering if as a strategic partner of this podcast, if I sell, what could I get right now? That's my question.
Are you saying that you're trying to cash out of the podcast as some long-time minority owners of the San Antonio Spurs decided to get while the getting was good? And
what my equity would be at this point, how much the podcast is worth.
I mean, I'm not sure if you could retire to the south of France. I'm not sure if you could retire at all, but there'd probably be.
I think what you would get is a taupe-colored mug.
I see.
To go with your salmon-colored mug, so you could have
something to think about.
It is a time of transition, as it has been for a while with this franchise. The news, we're recording this on Tuesday morning. The news of the day is that the Spurs have added yet another new quote unquote strategic partner from the world of Airbnb. Joe Gebbia joins Michael Dell and the investors from San Francisco. I think it's called Sixth Street Partners. All these new investors coming in, kind of bringing the Spurs into this new era. Obviously, they're committed to San Antonio. They've got a sprawling new campus in development on the northwest side. They're going to be here for a long time, but as this team goes through a rebuilding year, they're kind of reshuffling and getting ready for what awaits them. And I'm just wondering. I'm wondering, Tom, you probably had something on this morning. Any overall impressions of what this means?
Well, they continue to just reshape, the franchise and the ownership group and modernize it, really. For so many years, there were individual investors that owned, small stakes, a percentage here, a percentage there. And
a percentage that became very valuable over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was one original investor left, and he cashed out at a pretty lucrative price. But yeah, it's in line with what the NBA wants. They don't want these mom and pop investor type groups. They would rather have groups that are held by large firms, billionaires, just eliminating the number of small investors. So it's keeping with that. And the Spurs, just as they do with recruiting players, they've recruited some really heavy corporate hitters. And, Airbnb is in keeping with that. So it's just another piece of a makeover that began last June. That's continuing, and but the main thing is the Holt family continues to hold the largest share, and Peter J. Holt continues to be the managing partner.
The biggest question I had about this, Tom, and it's a huge source of concern for me. In order to retain my credentials to cover Spurs games, am I going to have to stop staying at Marriott's and going to Airbnbs, or is that going to be? Am I required to stay at somebody's house that's renting it out Airbnb style, like in Philadelphia or Milwaukee, or is that not affected at all?
Yikes. Yeah, I hope not. I hope not.
Not that there's anything wrong with Airbnbs, but we're creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit.
What I want to know is, can I Airbnb the AT&T Center for my kid's birthday party?
That could be an option. Yeah, that'd be something.
Who do I contact about this?
I think the new Pop. Yes, ask Pop about the Airbnb options.
I'll do that tomorrow.
He's all over that.
I'll do that tomorrow.
The other thing you could ask Pop about is, what the heck is going on in this town with this team? Like I said, the losing streak did come to an end over the past week, but this team is getting, I guess, healthy again. Derek White is back. Doug McDermott is back. I'm not sure I can't remember who else was out as of a week ago.
Trey Jones is still out. Trey Jones is still out. But the team is slowly getting healthy, but I'm just wondering about the overall,
position that this team is in. It's going to be in a situation where I guess the play-in tournament is going to be a possibility for the foreseeable future. But what is the sort of state of the basketball team itself as we head into the latter half of January, Jeff?
Well, the long losing streak was mostly related to like half the team getting COVID, and now half the team is back from COVID. But it just takes a while to get everybody back on the same page and get momentum rolling again. Last night, I don't know whenever you're listening to this, listeners and viewers out there, against the Suns, that was the first time the Spurs had their actual starting lineup, the five guys we've come to know and love since December 23rd. So it's just going to take a while for all the pieces to fit back together again. I don't know how long a while is. Against the Suns, the starters played really well. We're in that game. We're leading that game. We're up by 12 points in that game. In the third quarter, it was the bench that kind of let things get away, or let Phoenix get back into the game at the end of the third quarter. And then the fourth was just kind of a complete clown show all the way around. Just 5 turnovers, live ball turnovers, just everything you don't want to do to close a game against the best team in the Western Conference. The Spurs did it. So I don't think there was anything super surprising about that game. But I do think once they get the pieces back together, everyone back in rhythm at the same time, they'll be okay. They'll win some games and lose some games. They'll be back to where they were in mid-December. Whether that's enough to be a play-in team or not, I don't know. But it'll look better than it did during that kind of atrocious losing streak.
I guess the question is, what are they when they have everything back? If you look at the 3 most important guys on the team this year, and that is Dejounte Murray, Derek White, and Jakob Poeltl, there's been stretches where they've been without each of those 3 guys, and they haven't been very good when they don't have all 3 of them. I think they're 4-14. I actually did some research in the games when any of those guys have missed a game. 4-14.
Did you set an alarm to wake up early to do that research?
Yeah.
Wow. Dedication.
So when they're full strength, like I went back to my middle school math, grade school math, early math. If they're 10 games under 500 when they don't have all 3 of those guys, and they're 12 games under 500 overall, that means I think they're still 2 games under 500 when they're full strength, or when they have all 3 of those guys. So
there's a way. Go ahead. There's a way to further massage that sample size in that Derek White was technically healthy to start the season and playing a lot, but he was just kind of a mess of everything. Like he wasn't the Derek White that we've seen when he's been on the floor since about the start of December on. There's really been about a 15 game sample size where they've had all their guys, and Derek White wasn't in this season opening slump that he was in.
In all seriousness, and I'm not trying to be cute. I couldn't
if I tried. Look pretty good.
I couldn't be cute if I tried. But like every team can massage numbers that way and say, well, when we're at our best, this. My point is, like for people waiting for everything to come together and for all these circumstances to be ideal, like the peak still is sort of fringe playoff team. And
Yes.
I'm just, this isn't breaking news, but I just think that that's kind of obvious.
Well, welcome to the Spurs Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Captain Obvious.
There you go.
This team is this. I'm starting to think the Spurs team at best is a fringe playoff team. That's what the viewers come to hear.
I'm saying
these groundbreaking observations.
That's been the peak. Is a team that's kind of on the fringe there, and
yes, we all know this.
Peaking. There's been a lot of times when they're not peaking, and there's probably going to be more times in the future where not everything is going great. I think it's just sort of time. This is a segue. It's time for everyone to be realistic, and I'm not saying that the Spurs have not been realistic, but do you start thinking about trade deadline? Do you start thinking about what in the heck you're trying to accomplish with this season? Does your attention, does your focus shift over the second half of the season if you are Greg Popovich, if you are the brain trust of this team? Well, or do you just keep doing what you've been doing?
It's already kind of started to shift. Like, it's become obvious that Thad Young is not going to play again ever for the Spurs. I'm not breaking news, but it takes a lot to get that dude on the floor at this point. They had a game the other night where Drew Eubanks was out, Jakob Poeltl was in foul trouble, and they're not playing Thad Young for any sort of reason. Bryn Forbes is kind of in the same boat. He was playing a lot when like all the guards had COVID. But with all the guards back and a couple games since all the guards have been back, Bryn Forbes has been a DNP. You're seeing a lot more of Jock Landale, even in the nights where he's not been so great. They're still going to him. So if you're talking about does your focus switch that way, I think that focus has already been switched towards the group they want to develop and grow. As far as trade deadline, I mean, the guy you're looking at is Thad Young. That's the reason he's not playing. What they can get for him, I don't know. I was reminded I always say last night because it was last night. I was reminded last night when the Spurs played Phoenix, like that was a team, like from the get-go, from the time the Spurs acquired Thad Young, that was like the major team you heard was interested. That's the team that's going to come back at the trade deadline and look at him. Well, the Suns signed this fellow called Bismack Biyombo to a 10-day contract when they had their own COVID outbreak. And then he was so good, they signed him for the rest of the season. So I don't know if they have a Thad Young need anymore. And by the way, Biyombo murdered the Spurs last night. I don't know how it happened. This is not a guy that you expect in the year of our Lord 2022 to be winning basketball games against you. But that's what happens with good teams. They have dudes step up. It wasn't really Devin Booker's 48 or Chris Paul that beat the Spurs last night. It was Bismack Biyombo getting 17 and 14 off the bench. But I digress. They seem to have filled their Thad Young hole with Bismack Biyombo. So I don't know where the Spurs look now. Maybe there'll be somebody. I don't know what you flip them for. It'll be something. Of course, they'll continue to try to do because this is the one kind of leftover move they have from the offseason to try to complete. But I don't. Someone might come out of the woodwork, some suitor, but I don't see it right now. We got a month to go.
Plus, Bryn Forbes probably could be had too.
Sure.
Plus, your all signs point to Zach Collins returning, maybe as soon as next week. So that further gives the Spurs, another piece to look at as they go about trying to make plans for a long range as this rebuilding continues.
What has your thought process on the Thad Young? I guess what I'm asking is you mentioned this on Twitter last week, Jeff, about how the Spurs already got what they wanted from the DeMar DeRozan deal, and they got their first round pick, and which is years from now, and a second round pick this year, which could be pretty good. Like, does how much of the analysis of that trade does the bottom line of that trade, how much of that is affected by whether you get anything for Thad Young or not?
I mean, I don't know. You can't. The way I phrased it, it's like you said, they got the whole purpose of that deal was to move a guy, DeMar Derozan, who wasn't going to play here. He was either going to, he was an unrestricted free agent that was going to go sign with the Bulls. Now you can either get something back, you can either get anything back for him or not. Well, let's do a sign and trade and get something. But what they wanted the most was the picks. It's like your Christmas list is you want your mom to get you an Xbox. She gets you the Xbox. Hey, throws in this just a scratch off lottery ticket to go with it, just for fun. That's Thad Young. You scratch it off, you win $10. Awesome. You know, that's $10 I didn't have. That's gravy on top of my Xbox. You scratch it off and you get nothing. You don't go, well, this whole Christmas sucks. You still got your Xbox. You got the Xbox. You got the thing you wanted the most. I always looked at anytime you get something like that in a trade, an NBA trade, that you're trying to flip for something else. If you can do it, it's great, but you can't. I mean, you can't force other teams to take it. You have to have that. You have to have that understanding and that reality going in, that you can't force someone to trade for your guy. And I guarantee you the Spurs aren't holding out for KD. You know, like, give me a second round pick and you can have Thad Young probably. Give me a late first rounder and you can have him for sure.
Chris Dunn. Do they want Chris Dunn? I don't think that you're wrong. And the problem with these,
that's because I'm not.
The problem with these sort of hot take conversations is there's just all the sort of gray area nuance gets lost in it. But I do think, like devil's advocate, Thad Young was more than a lottery pick, or more than a lottery ticket. I think he had some, like, when that trade was made, when people were talking about how the Spurs did, hey, they got Thad Young out of it. This is something that this is a piece that people could want. They could turn that into something. That was part of why that trade was well reviewed for the Spurs. And for them to end up getting nothing for him, I think would be a disappointment.
Well,
Number two, I don't think that the picks that they got were necessarily the equivalent of the Xbox, in that, you know, there's a first round pick that could end up coming in like 2025, 2026. You know, that's fine. It's not just a huge draft pick return. And again, now I'm sounding like I'm being overly negative. I'm not. I'm just trying to present both sides of this argument. The other thing is, the Spurs sort of chose last year to take DeMar into the offseason and to get what they could get in the offseason trade in a sign and trade. You know, you kind of have to evaluate not just what's happening this year with Thad Young, and he's hard to trade. I understand that. And not just evaluate what happened last summer when they got the best that they could do with DeMar wanting to leave, but also, like, you go all the way back to the middle of last season with, could they have gotten more for DeMar when he still had a half year left?
Sure.
Maybe not. Probably not. I'm just saying there's degrees of all this up and down, and it's not entirely unreasonable to sort of look back and wonder if they did this perfectly. And I don't think anybody would say that they did.
I mean,
it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, hey, they should have done X, Y, Z. But I think the overall picture here is they did okay. Like, it's not the worst thing. It wasn't like organizational malpractice. They're going to get picks out of it, but it hasn't gone swimmingly. It hasn't gone perfect. And I don't know. I know that's not much of a hot take headline.
Yeah. But. I mean, we don't really have time on the podcast, but if you want to go, like, if you want to unravel it to that point, you can just keep unraveling it to why did they have DeMar in the first place? Why didn't they make a different deal? I mean, it's just you have the circumstances you have, and you have to make the most of it. And I think I got no problem with the Spurs taking DeMar to the offseason. Like, I also, let's not act like they didn't try to, like, they didn't look at options while DeMar was there also. like at the trade deadline last year. The idea that just because they didn't trade a guy doesn't mean they didn't look at it or didn't try to trade a guy. Or didn't we almost never know what the offers were, what was rejected, what was turned down, what could have been. It's hard to have these conversations because we never know what the other concrete alternatives were. So
I also want to be clear in that every step of this way, we never said on this podcast, wow, they're really screwing up by doing X, Y, Z. Like every move they've made along the way, going back to like trading Kawhi Leonard. It's like, okay, that sort of makes sense. You know, there's nothing that they've done that was like, this is outrageous. They should have done this. And you know, you mentioned the Spurs or the Suns striking it lucky with like a Bismack Biyombo 10-day contract. Organizations need stuff just to work out every now and then like that. Like anybody could have had that guy and they ended up, maybe that guy could help them. The Spurs, I think it's fair to say, over the past 4 years, almost 4 years, just nothing has worked out great. They've made a lot of moves that sort of made sense and had thought behind it. And obviously they put a lot of thought into everything they do. It's just been a while since, they really got lucky with that Leonard trade. They really got lucky by hanging on to LaMarcus Aldridge or hanging on to DeMar DeRozan or whatever. It's just that you're kind of waiting for that next just stroke of good luck to happen. And until it does, you're kind of in a holding pattern. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
I mean, there have been moves that still have potential. I mean, they got Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl probably worked out better than anybody would have thought when he was thrown into the Kawhi trade. You get a Keldon Johnson. There's still hopes for like a Devin Vassell in the draft, Josh Primo in the draft. You just need one of these things to hit. What
you're saying is you need one of these scratch-off tickets to come in at like $30 instead of just $5,
right?
Or nothing. That's what you're saying. I've been doing a lot of scratch-offs lately. It's my retirement plan. That's why I keep coming back to that analogy. It's also it's not working out great for me either. Much like the Spurs, nothing's working out great.
Well, keep trying it. I'm sure the odds.
Well, I did win $10,000, but I turned them in for 10,000 more scratch-off tickets.
That's probably not wise. The scratch-off tickets up in Austin, I guess that's something else to talk about. Tom mentioned it earlier. Zach Collins played for the first time in, is it a year and a half? I think the last time he played was August of 2020.
Yeah.
He's playing. Josh Primo's back in the G League. Yeah. What do we expect from those guys moving forward?
Well, he played about 20 minutes. He started 8 points, 3 blocks, picked up a technical. That might have been the most revealing moment about him. You know, the players have talked about, Keldon talked last night about the attitude that Zach has, that he's got some meanness to him, some attitude. And he got scored on, drive into the basket, drive into the lane. He gets the ball, turns and pivots and fires it at the support, and picked up a technical for that. So, there's some emotion there that who knows what that'll bring to this group. But, they're all excited about him coming back. And it's a great story. I mean, the guy's been through a heck of a lot, and here he is on the cusp of returning. So what it'll mean remains to be seen. It's not good for Drew Eubanks. We know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
but right. I mean, it'll be interesting. Like if Collins comes back and Pop wants to give him minutes, it will actually be interesting to see where they come from, because I mean, it's not going to affect Drew all that much, because Drew ain't playing all that much when both Jakob Poeltl and Jock Landale are healthy. But will it cut into Landale's minutes? You think it probably will, and
probably
that'll be an interesting kind of dynamic as well. How they fit all that. Knowing Pop, you're not going to see Collins out there playing 20 minutes, maybe at all this season, but certainly not at first. It's going to be a cameo here or there as he gets his feet wet.
Trivia question for you, and it's a slam dunk gimme for beat writers, but for the listeners out there might be interested in this. Who are the 2 highest drafted members of the San Antonio Spurs as currently constituted?
Okay, do you want to give everybody a chance to answer, like in their heads, all the viewers?
Sure. I'm sure they're out there.
Maybe Luis can our producer can thread in the Jeopardy theme song right here.
Our listeners are so well informed. They're always at expressnews.com. They're subscribing to the Spurs Nation's newsletter. They know about what a great deal it is to subscribe digitally or in the Dead Tree edition of the San Antonio Express News. So I'm sure they know the answer to this, but go ahead and reveal the 2 highest drafted members of the San Antonio Spurs.
The number 1 highest drafted member of the San Antonio Spurs is a fellow called Jakob Poeltl. He was taken 9th overall in his draft.
9th overall.
Okay. Number 2 on that list, and this is what you were getting at, is a fellow called Zachary Collins, who was drafted 10th overall. 10th overall in 2017. I'm also on Zach Collins' basketball reference page right now, just so I got the number right. It says his nickname is Zebo, which is that's not true at all.
That's not true. No, I think that's someone called him that ironically, maybe.
They got the wrong guy.
Yeah. Zach Collins, quite a dresser. Enjoyed his outfits on the sidelines so far this season. He seems very enthusiastic in terms of being a Patty Mills type cheerleader. We'll see if he can contribute. My point with this is we're talking about all season about what a rebuilding this year this is and all the pieces they have for the future. There's still this weird team that is rebuilding and has no real top draft picks. I mean, Jakob Poeltl and Zach Collins, who they got at a bargain basement free agent deal. You don't have those guys that every other rebuilding team sort of hopes on. The top 5, top 6, top 7 picks. They're trying to do something that not many teams have done. And that is try to rebuild with a young core that was not drafted in the top 10. And that's just really challenging to do.
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, unless one of the, unless you get, I mean, I guess you look at Utah, they got Donovan Mitchell, who's not in the top 10, and Rudy Gobert, who's not in the top 10 and built around that. So maybe but that's going back to our analogy du jour. That's just 2 lottery tickets for them that really paid off. Like eventually you're either going to have to find a way to attract that kind of talent, which means having one of those draft picks, probably one of those high draft picks, or trading for a guy, I guess. I don't know.
It's a confusing analogy you're using because you're calling the lottery tickets the picks that aren't in the lottery of the draft. But
I mean. You know what I mean? But like you compare the Spurs, like Houston came to town on this homestand, and Houston's terrible. They're the worst team in the Western Conference record-wise. But you look at them on the floor, the actual players they have, Jalen Green, you can completely tell the difference, just athletically and potential-wise, between the Rockets, who do have just a collection of lottery talent that's just young and hasn't meshed yet, compared to the Spurs, who have a better basketball team, even though they lost the game, but they don't have those same kind of just physical specimens. You can totally see it. So, I mean, look at all the teams that have risen in the West. You look at Memphis, that was bad for some. I mean, it was just last year the Spurs were playing Memphis for a play-in spot. Now Memphis might be the best team in the freaking conference. And it's just this collection of just studs, like just physical studs, that the Spurs just don't have, despite the fact that they're starting to get some of those lottery picks. But again, there's also a difference between the late lottery and the early lottery. You know what I mean? Yeah. If as much as we all like, and then I think this is a good point for why the Spurs are going to take Josh Primo there. Just take a swing. You're not getting Jalen Green. You're not getting Cade Cunningham. So take a swing at number 12 instead of taking a guy that might end up being just solid. Instead of the guy you're getting at 12 is probably going to end up being just solid. Take a swing at a guy that maybe with a little longer timetable will be better than just solid, and Josh Primo. I think that was gamble there. But
it's what they did with that pick a few years ago when they took Luka Samanic instead of a guy who was probably going to be solid in Brandon Clark was available there.
That's the guy.
He's turned into a pretty solid player at Memphis, and they would have been better off taking Brandon Clark there. But the thinking was, you kind of knew what Brandon Clark was going to be, and he was going to be a solid, fourth, fifth option on a team, which he is, and that's nothing to sneeze at. But you kind of want to take a big swing and hope that this new Luka could be the next Luka, and it did not work out. When you take those big swings, sometimes you take big misses. But I've heard people mention this year, and I totally understand this sentiment about, there's all this young talent on this team, and you kind of hope it comes together. When you look at how just numerically how the Spurs elite talent compares to every other team in the league, it's not the same. They don't have those high pedigree, top 5, top 10 picks that everybody else has. You're getting almost best case scenario Dejounte Murray, and we're going to wind this podcast down. We haven't mentioned him yet, and we probably can the last 5 or so minutes of this. This is what you dreamed of when you drafted Dejounte Murray. Like, he's becoming a top shelf, near elite point guard, averaging almost a triple double a night, making quite a bid to make the All-Star team, which a bid that probably got helped when Damian Lillard went out to surgery last week. There's still hope that Murray can make it, but this is just striking it rich with that pick where you got Dejounte Murray, and it's still like Dejounte Murray, who's awesome. If he's your best player, you're kind of a team that is fighting to get in the play-in tournament. And that's, maybe that sounds depressing to Spurs fans out there, but it's kind of just the way it is. Like, you can do well with drafting Dejounte Murray and Derek White and Devin Vassell and Lonnie Walker, and all those guys have probably exceeded their draft position, and you're still kind of waiting to see how you become a contender again.
At this time last year, Ja Morant was the best player on the Memphis Grizzlies, and they were fighting for a play-in berth. You know what I mean? That's true. Well, what I'm saying is it's all the guys around you as well.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you this.
It's a whole puzzle that has to be put together.
Let me ask you this, though. And this is not about criticizing Dejounte Murray at all. I'm just saying, I'm just asking a genuine question. Do you think that Dejounte Murray is in the has the star potential of Ja Morant?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. And Dejounte Murray is great. Ja Morant, you look at him, and that is best player in the NBA potential.
One was taken third overall, one was taken 29th.
NBA.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a huge difference. It's a huge difference to take a guy knowing that he could be the best player on the floor every night, no matter who he plays against. I'm talking he can be better than LeBron James, not as a career, but when the Grizzlies play the Lakers in 2022, like, I'd rather have Ja Morant than LeBron James almost.
Yeah, that was the kind of the point I was going to make. Like, that guy was the best guy on the Grizzlies last year, and granted, he's taken steps this year. But that guy with the potential to be the best player of the NBA was the best player on the Grizzlies last year, and they were still a kind of a fringe. They were still a playing team. So to me, what the Grizzlies have what the Grizzlies have done is Ja has gotten better since last year, but it's more than that. Like, you can't just look at if Dejounte just keeps taking strides, the Spurs will keep moving up. I think that's one step of it. But it's also the pieces around. He needs his Jaren Jackson Jr. and he needs, these other high lottery picks that Memphis has put together. And then what Memphis is able to do is just kind of fill in the blanks of their when you have those high lottery picks in place, then you just fill in the blanks with those role players like Steven Adams and Kyle Anderson. Dylan Brooks becomes
Desmond Bain.
And there's another that's sort of like you were talking about Spurs needing one of these gambles to really pay off. I don't know that Desmond Bain was a gamble, but he was a low draft pick. I mean, not low, but
30th pick.
Yeah, low first round pick. Yeah.
Yep.
Last pick in the draft becomes just a huge piece of your team. And that's how you get from being a team that is muddling around at 10th to a team that could possibly win the conference. Is all those things kind of happening in addition to your stud being a stud. So
yeah,
I don't know what our point is there. I got lost in the weeds.
Have we missed anything? Tom still is struggling with his coffee, I assume. Have we missed anything, Nick Talbot? Do you want to set us straight on anything we've missed so far before we wind this down?
No, I don't think y'all missed on too much. You know, Jeff kind of rambles on and gets to the point eventually and gets everything pretty clear. But once you get gets that big gulp into him, he kind of gets everything. But when you're talking, if getting the next Ja Morant or anything, looking at it and they still have a shot to play in, that's because the West isn't very deep at that 10 slot. So they're still looking at the 6th pick overall. So maybe that's the lottery ticket they need, is they can still get to this play-in and still compete for the play-in, but still also have a shot at picking 6th or 7th. It's not a terrible spot to be in if you're looking at rebuilding.
That's the weird spot they're in that, like right now, they are 2.5 games out of the play-in spot and 3.5 out of the worst record in the West. So to your point, Nick, like you can sort of ride that fence for a while, straddle that fence. And if you miss out on one, you still have a chance at the other. And you don't have to have the worst record in the conference to finish with the top 3 pick like that. That's why it is a lottery. You do have a chance at it. Your chances are higher if your record is worse. But I guess that's sort of where we can leave it this week, is you just continue with what you're doing. There could be upsides to both outcomes, kind of in a holding pattern for the time being, but you could find the bright side both ways. I'm going to do this very half-heartedly, this finish, because I'm not sure if I believe it as much as I believe it some weeks.
You're not even believing your own slop now.
I appreciate your self-correction there when you turn schlop into what you were finishing. That was very professional. And all of you out there, sometimes you don't believe your own schlop, but I mean, just fake it till you make it. Take care of each other and keep it real.